What pick would you have to give up to get Ryan Kesler on deadline day?
Probably a first, but it would already be in the form of an actual player who could help them. They're going to want a lot. They could use some of those depth players too, but they're going to want a front end player or two if in fact they move Kesler.
How much truth is there around the report that came from Louis Jean yesterday and subsequently was panned by the agent? I saw your tweet last night. How much truth is there though with Ryan Kesler's unrest with the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, until we hear from Kesler, who knows? But there's an awful lot of smoke here, and my own belief is that for whatever reason he is unhappy. Whether he actually said the words "I want to trade," I think is largely semantics. I think the team has been listening to offers on Ryan Kesler and are probably going to get a bunch more of them in the next 5 days. And I think there's a pretty good chance that he'll get moved, injury and all, before the deadline. Certainly the Canucks can't afford to make a bad trade. In this case, no trade is better than making a bad one. But I don't think that Kesler is going to see out this contract with the Canucks.
Ian, following him, over the last few years, if he requested a trade, where would you pinpoint the reasons why? Would it be strictly a personal thing, or would it be the fact that maybe the writing's on the wall and the team's on a decline? Where would you guess?
Yeah, I would say that it's a collection of things. I know instantly there was a lot of speculation about how he gets along with John Tortorella, because some guys don't. But I have a hard time believing that that's the central issue here. I think the fact that the team clearly is slipping from farther from where it was in 2011 when it went to Game 7, instead of moving back closer to it. I think the fact that Henrik Sedin has been re-signed and is going to be the first-line center as long as he's here maybe is a factor. I think that maybe Kesler wants a more, or could want potentially a more central leadership role, even though he's a leader on this team. He just, doesn't have the letter to go with it, and it might be family reasons as well. I mean, who knows? There's all kinds of reasons players decide after several years in one place that they want to go somewhere else. But I think probably it's just a collection of things, and I do think if there is a trade, he's going to move closer to home. If it's not Detroit, then somewhere in the East.
It's a tough situation, Ian, and you're, on the ground there. For them to tear this down, I don't see that happening. I think they've got to try to retool where they are as a franchise. Is that the type of deal they'd be looking to make, a retooling type of deal? Obviously, a Heatley Setaguchi for a Brent Burns type of deal.
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree with you entirely, Doug, on that, and it's mystified me a little bit, the proponents who suggest that it's time to blow it up, because the core group, although they're not young, they're not old, there's still a window here, but they have to get younger. And in that respect, I think, again, let's assume that it's true that Kesler wants out and that the Canucks will be able to make a good deal. This is a blessing in disguise for this team, because they have to get younger with their core group. They have to, apart from the age factor, they just have to freshen the core group, because it's gone a little stale here because they haven't made substantial changes to their core in a few years. And Kesler has immense value, in my opinion, around the league, probably more than any player on their team. So there's all kinds of boxes that the Canucks can check off if they make a good trade for Kesler. If they make a bad trade, they may as well leave, because Mike Ellis is going to be out of a job.
Right.
But if they can make a good trade, this could set the team up. It could start to nudge them back towards being able to challenge for a Stanley Cup and stop them slipping away. But it's certainly, assuming, let's say, they get two good young players who actually play, I mean, this really could help the Canucks for the next 10 years, much like the Trevor Linden trade did 3/4 of a generation ago, where they ended up with one of the Sedins and Todd Bertuzzi, who became Roberto Luongo. That's the kind of magnitude and impact a Kesler trade could have for them.
Do the one they did with Pittsburgh too, and got Marcus. Anyway,
for Alex Stoyanov, yeah,
right, exactly. What about this type of deal? And I know you think it's going to happen sooner than later, but Ian, I find it interesting that I see this as more of a draft time type of deal, because that's where, there's a bit better. There's more of an opportunity. That's where you see the bigger deals made. Am I wrong on that? Do you think there's enough time to make, and there's enough interest? I know there's interest, but enough time to put a big deal like this together?
Well, I think it's now a problem for the Canucks. It's one thing when they were dealing with Roberto Luongo and the goaltending situation. Dealing with this, it's going to be troublesome for them, and especially for Ryan Kesler from now until he leaves the organization. So I think there's a little added impetus to move him now.
True.
But without doubt, this current season and the way so many teams are up against the cap, the way that you have to make the money work on deals, whether it's October or March, the money, you still have to be under the salary cap. There are circumstances that make it difficult to trade him, and that's why, although I do think there's a good chance he could get moved by Wednesday, probably it's 50-50. There's a good chance that they'll hang on to him, but they hung on so long to Luongo to try to make the perfect deal. And in the end, they had to come to a very imperfect solution and trade Corey Schneider at the last draft. And I think they'd be a little wary of getting themselves into that situation again.
Just quickly, and we've got 2 minutes here, and Kibbe wants to jump in. Yeah. Was Kesler telling people at the Olympics he wanted out?
Well, I wasn't there, but I heard from a colleague of mine that was out somewhere and had been told, and I don't know by whom. So it's all hearsay. I know Bruce Arthur, the columnist from the National Post, tweeted last night that Kesler was telling, and he was there, of course, in Sochi, tweeted last night that Kesler was telling people after the bronze medal game that he wanted out of Vancouver, and that rumor had been kind of percolating since the weekend before Louis Jean's story came out last night.
Hey, Ian, just quickly on we mentioned Kesler as a forward. How about the blue line here? Is it just a foregone conclusion that you're not really going to be in a situation where you can move any of the top four in Hamhuis, Garrison, Bieksa, Edler? Has he been as big a disappointment as we hear, or can you go off the board and maybe move a young kid like Tanev?
I don't think they can afford to trade their young guys, and Tanev is really good and is only going to get better, but he does need a new contract. I think of that group, it's largely untouchable, but again, they all have no trade clauses, but again, if someone is really unhappy, then that changes the situation. And Alex Edler is a name that's popped up several times over the course of the season. In fact, there was a lot of Alex Edler trade talk before Corey Schneider was traded, and it wouldn't stun me if something happened with Edler. But again, the players in the driver's seat. He's not had a very good season. John Tortorella himself has said that he's discovered that tough love doesn't work with Alex Edler. So maybe Alex Edler hasn't enjoyed that experience with John Tortorella. I think right now, though, the Kesler thing is going to preoccupy them, but it wouldn't stun me if Alex Edler it certainly got put into play. Whether he gets traded or not, I don't know.